Hi, everyone. It's William Henry. I'm here today to offer my commentary on the recent encyclical released by the Vatican under the title, or excuse me, under the name of Pope Leo XIV. It's called Magnifica Humanitas, or Magnificent Humanity. It is an extremely important document in that it represents the Vatican's not first, but new major commentary on artificial intelligence and transhumanism. It's been long anticipated, and there's some surprises in it for me, and I'm sure for you as well. In it, Pope Leo warns against a spiritual orientation towards technology that seeks to replace humanity rather than enhance it. That's his great concern. Not the technology itself, but that humanity will suddenly adapt a new spirituality that embraces the technology and ultimately replaces humanity rather than exalts it. And first off, I want to say what I find interesting about that, as someone who has researched and written about and spoken about AI and transhumanism since 2003. I wrote my first book, Cloak of the Illuminati, about it in 2003 and continue to do conferences. In 2015, I published my book, The Singularity Is Near, which was about my previous 10 years research and commentary on AI and transhumanism. And it aligns in a really incredible way with what the Pope said. In his encyclical, the Pope said that we essentially have two choices. We can rebuild the Tower of Babel, which represents a technological choice, and one that leads to power and control at the top, or we can choose a separate pillar and build the Jerusalem, or the New Jerusalem, as it's referred to. And this is what the Vatican, the Church of Love, as Pope Leo refers to it as, seeks to ultimately make the choice for humanity. Well, in my book, The Singularity Is Near, or excuse me, The Singularity Is Near, I had already put that choice before us, in the sense that I had ascertained in my early research that we really do have two choices here. We either are going to remain pure humans or organic humans, the terminology that I used in that book, or we're going to embrace transhumanism. And mind you, my approach to it back then was very fear-based, not entirely fear-based, but it was very fear-based in this choice. And I share the viewpoint of the Pope concerning these two pillars. The other thing that I found intriguing about the encyclical Magnificent Humanity is that in The Singularity Is Near, I had used that word magnificent 14 times in a 90-page book. The Pope's encyclical is also around 84 or 85 pages. And I found it intriguing that the Pope landed on that word or vibration, magnificent humanity, because to me, it ultimately captured what we're all aspiring to be. We know that humanity can become more than it is. And at the time, I happened to be listening to Ben Iver's song, Holocene, which had that word magnificent in a line in there saying, I'm not magnificent. And for some reason, it just rang in my head. I kept it on repeat as I was writing that book because of the vibe or the frequency that it put me at. And the word magnificent sort of became a golden needle that I wove through the book, and I tried to use it as many times as I could, asking the question, are we magnificent? How do we become magnificent? And what does it mean to be magnificent humanity? So I was kind of intrigued that the Pope used exactly those same words and also the same structure of Babel versus Jerusalem. And I further find this very intriguing because in 2018, I had written an extensive article, a 10,000 word article, comparing fallen Babylon to the New Jerusalem. And I say all that to say that I'm in resonance with the Pope's approach to it. I'm intrigued by the approach, but at the same time, I'm kind of disappointed in a way, in some of what the Pope has said. And let me give you an example of that. In setting up our choice before us of these two pillars, the pure human pillar versus the transhuman pillar, he sets it up as this return to a cyclical event, the building of the Tower of Babel. Let's go back to the book of Genesis and talk about that story for a moment. We're told in Genesis that within just a few generations of the flood of Noah, which today we understand to be the end of the Younger Dryas, that puts it around 10,000 BC, this major global cataclysm that decimated humanity and destroyed what many believe was an advanced pre-flood civilization. We have humanity regrouping in Babylon under the auspices of King Nimrod in order to build the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel, the word Babel means ladder, tower, or stairway to heaven. And the idea is that humanity was using technology that must have come from the pre-flood world, because we're just a few generations after the flood. And now we're going to use this technology to build a conduit to the divine realm. But the Old Testament God, the Jewish God Yahweh, in Genesis says he doesn't want company. So he destroys our tower and separates humankind by language. And the reason why is because, as Genesis says, if humanity is unified by language, and in the in-between words, we're thinking about the technology they possessed as well. If humanity is unified, speaking one language, Genesis says nothing will be impossible for us. And as I read that years ago, the same question rings in my head. Why would God not want our company in the higher realms? And two, why would he not want us to do impossible things? What is going on here? And that always struck with me. So here we have Pope Leo saying AI and transhumanism is nothing more than a recreation of the Tower of Babel incident. And he's juxtaposing that with the idea that what we really want to do is build Jerusalem. And by Jerusalem, he's not, I believe he's not speaking of the city in present-day Israel, Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount, where the site of Solomon's temple. I think what he's talking about is the New Jerusalem, which is spoken of in the book of Revelation, and it's described quite explicitly. Pope Leo does not describe the Jerusalem in his book at all. But in the book of Revelation, the New Jerusalem is a glowing cosmic cube. It's 1,500 miles square. It suddenly appears in the sky, perhaps above Jerusalem, in the end times. It's the dwelling place of the Lord, where the throne of Jesus Christ is located. And actually, as the New Jerusalem embarks on this quest or this connection with humanity, the Lord steps out of this cube and lives among man. And the potential then is that a select group of humans will be able to ascend to that cosmic cube and then will dwell with the Lord in that cube. So this is what Pope Leo is setting up in this encyclical. It's like, no, we're not going to rebuild the Tower of Babel. We're going to build the New Jerusalem, or we're going to manifest the New Jerusalem. So I found that to be a very fascinating juxtaposition, again, in light of my own course through that same line of thinking 8 or 9 years ago now. Something else that I want to comment on here is that it's, in a way, from certain perspectives, or the perspective of certain technology observers, it's strange that the Vatican would be denigrating AI and transhuman technology. And the reason I say that is because it is claimed or proposed that AI, or especially transhuman technology, is Christianity. It is an outgrowth of Christianity. And that might sound strange at first, but let me unpack this for you. The line of thinking goes like this, that within Western civilization, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, we have an alpha moment. We have a beginning point. And that is the moment that Adam and Eve are evicted from the Garden of Eden. We're told that Eden was in a third heaven, another location, perhaps another dimension. And when humanity fell, what happened was we were escorted out of Eden. The Old Testament God, again, the Jewish God Yahweh, built a gate at the east of Eden with 2 pillars. and a flashing, flaming sword in the middle of that gate, and posted cherubim angels on either side, and forbade or indeed challenged humanity to get back through that gate. The other thing that Yahweh did is he made for humans coats of skin. And in traditional Christian teaching, it's assumed that those coats of skin are animal skins, goat skin, deer skin, such things as that. But in esoteric Judaism and Christianity, those coats of skin are our human bodies. And what that means is that these bodies are a vehicle for our soul's incarnation. And within Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is the belief that our soul quest is to get back through that gate of Eden. And the idea is that in order to do that, we've got to transit through our fallen state, which they also refer to as a state of sin. Within Christianity, we're all sinners because we are in our physical flesh and blood body. We have missed the mark. We're not perfect, is the term that is used. And so our quest is to dissolve ourselves of this body, relieve ourselves of this body, and get back through that gate. Now, what happened is, in the early centuries of Christianity, you would have monks that are out working in the field to feed themselves and their families, their community. But in the back of their mind is they want to get back to their original work project, which is to get back through the gate of Eden. And what happened is, historically, is that you have some inventions that come along. The first really big one is a plow that could be pulled by multiple oxen. And because that this enabled the farmers to greatly reduce the amount of time they're spending out in the fields growing food, this technology was viewed as a gift from God. God didn't want us out in the field 8, 10, 12 hours a day. He wanted us working on our original project. How do we perfect ourselves? How do we get out of this sinful state and return to our original state of perfection? And so this technology is viewed as a gift because it would now accelerate our ability to ascend, our ability to transit through this sinful state. So what happens is now you have a succession of technologies, of inventions, the clock, eyeglasses, printing press, telescope, other ideas that accentuate our consciousness, our intelligence, and enable us to know more about our universe. The telescope enabled us to see very distant stars, and now we can see very, very distant stars. The microscope enabled us to peer into the micro world. Eyeglasses enabled us to augment the body. In fact, when eyeglasses were first introduced, it was hugely controversial, especially from the church's position. And their position was, well, if God wanted you to see, he would have given you a decent set of eyes, a better set of eyes. Who are you to challenge God's authority by putting on eyeglasses? So the technology centers of the ancient world that were developing these technologies were, of course, the cathedrals, and these became university centers. They became literally tech centers where humanity started to develop this mindset that technology is a gift from God meant for us to accelerate our ascension, to accelerate our evolution. And this is why technology, especially computer technology, AI and transhuman technology, emerged from America. It doesn't come from China. It doesn't come from Africa. It doesn't come from Egypt. It comes from America because America had this belief from its very foundation that technology was a gift from God. It was imported from Europe when the first pilgrims and the first settlers started coming to the New World. They brought this technology with them with the idea that America was going to be the new promised land and that they would be able to use this technology to accelerate human progress. And so that brings us right up to where we are today with AI and transhuman technology as the ultimate fulfillment of this idea that technology can be used to amplify our abilities and to accelerate our perfection. And in fact, Perfection is exactly the term that you see bandied about often in Silicon Valley relative to transhuman technology. They believe they are perfecting the body. We're fragile, we're unfinished, and we can utilize technology to accelerate our transformation and ultimately our perfection. Now, most Christians aren't aware of that backstory. So when they're listening to the Pope's or reading the Pope's encyclical, Magnifica Humanitas, they're not thinking that, wait a minute, what Pope Leo is actually chastising rather, is really a Christian concept. And we need to have that historical background behind it. So that's an important aspect of this idea of the fallen Jerusalem versus the New Jerusalem, or fallen Babylon versus New Jerusalem, is a wonderful kind of setup. But as a matter of fact, it's not quite valid. The choice is not quite as cut and dry as perhaps Pope Leo would like for us to believe. Christianity, as I'm saying here, has been instrumental in the development of this technology, and it is, in fact, could be viewed as a Christian-based concept. Now, another comment I want to make about this encyclical is that it's far too late for the Vatican to be making this statement. In my opinion, I applaud this statement for those who are just waking up. The new babes in the know club will really get a lot out of this encyclical, and hopefully it will spark interest. But really, the Vatican should have made this statement at least 10 years ago, because they already knew what was coming 10 years ago. And I say that because this encyclical is based on what are referred to as the Minerva Dialogs. This began to take place around 10 years ago in Rome, next to the church of Sopra Minerva, which is why it's called the Minerva Dialogs. Catholic priests with an interest in technology brought all the tech giants over to Rome and would engage in these dialogues. The tech giants, the tech lords would be telling the Vatican, hey, here's what's coming with AI and transhuman technology. So the Vatican knew what was coming 10 years ago when all of this infrastructure was already set in place. That was the time to intervene. That was the time to have a global conversation about AI and transhumanism before the genie was out of the bottle, as it is now. There is, in my opinion, short of a solar flare, major Earth cataclysm, some sort of a reset, we are not going to stop the march of AI and transhuman technology. I would be in favor of stopping it. However, the cat is out of the bag. And so when the Vatican engaged in those Minerva dialogues 10 years ago, that's when they should have put the brakes on this. And I mean, not to glorify myself, but I was involved in this conversation 10 years ago in 2016. I readily could read the tea leaves and see exactly what was coming. And if I were the Pope with all the enormous resources of the Vatican, you would think they would have also readily ascertained what was coming and intervened at that time, not 10 years later when it's, again, possibly too late to do anything about it of any great significance. I find it fascinating that it's called the Minerva Dialogues, by the way, because Minerva is the Roman name for Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom and war. In Greek mythology, Athena, Minerva, played a role in the creation of humankind. In the Greek creation myth, there's a god of technology. His name is Hephaestus. He's the god of smithcraft and alchemy. He's an inventor. He built the first robot that guarded the island of Crete. And Hephaestus created the first human being. Her name was Pandora. The Greek myth says if it wasn't Hephaestus, then it was also Prometheus, or Prometheus, who created the first human, Pandora. And Athena, Minerva, steps in because apparently Pandora did not have a soul. But Athena had a way to fix that. Athena put a butterfly, the symbol of the psyche or the soul, on Pandora, and she became a living being. What this means is that humanity has been talking about the human body as an artificial transhuman creation for thousands of years. Our myths always tell the same story. There was an extraterrestrial being, a divine being, a demigod who altered our DNA, as the Sumerians say and the Egyptians say, or Hephaestus, who literally creates the body out of clay, which of course is a metaphor for DNA, and creates it as an artificial entity. So from that perspective, the Vatican must have had an appreciation that the ancients always believed that we're a hybrid being. We are and have been always a transhuman being. So when I put forth my pure human hypothesis, that really had a flaw in it, because as a matter of fact, humans have never been pure humans. We've always been hybrid beings, and we're always in the process of evolving into something more. And so I think that those points are important to consider with this encyclical. The further point about this encyclical that is, I'll use the word troubling to me, is what it omits. Remember, this encyclical, the origins of it go back 10 years. That's 2016. In 2016, I had already written my book, The Singularity Is Near, very clearly putting these two pillars in place as the choice before us. But I was also on the trail of simulation theory or simulation hypothesis, this radical idea put forth mainly by transhumanists that we live in an artificial reality, that behaves similar to a computer simulation. And this goes back to 2003 with the famous paper by Nick Bostrom from Oxford University, who said that when a civilization reaches an advanced level of technology, such as us, we will begin to create simulations, and that we will begin to create simulated worlds, just as we are now doing today. And that mathematically, those simulations will be greater in number than the biological beings in any of those worlds. Based on that, Bostrom proposed that, per the math, we are probably living in a simulation. This is not the base reality. This is the lens, the primary philosophical lens beyond Christianity, through which AI and transhumanists view our world. And so within his encyclical, the Pope says nothing about this guiding philosophy of AI and transhumanism, completely omits the subject. And to me, that is a critical loss for anybody trying to understand what is happening with AI and transhumanism, because AI and transhuman technology are intermediate steps to what the Pope is actually warning about, this idea that there will be a technological philosophy in which humans will decide to replace humanity with simulated beings living in a simulated reality, rather than elevate humanity, perfect ourselves, follow the path of transfiguration of Christ. The Pope mentions absolutely nothing about the possibilities of what a magnificent human being is, even though this was the exact mission of Jesus when he descended into our world and taught us, showed us how we can transfigure, elevate our bodies, utilize the hardwired propensities within us to convert our earthly flesh into celestial flesh or a light body. That is what we're supposed to be doing according to Jesus. But the Pope mentions nothing about any of that, completely omits any discussion about what is possible for us. And again, I'm not trying to offer a damning criticism. I'm just looking at this going, what's the point here, right? He could have just given out my book, The Singularity Is Near, because I've made the exact same arguments 10 years ago when we might have been able to do something about all of this. So that's where I'm left now with Magnifica Humanitas, that it's an important document for the new babes in the know club. But for those who are really seeking answers about how we navigate what's happening with AI and transhumanism, it ultimately falls short, in my opinion. And this is where we now have to begin to understand the crossover between AI and transhumanism, simulation theory and hypothesis, and Christianity, because there are important correspondences. Simulation theory proposes, again, that we don't live in the base reality, that we live in a world that has been created by some demigod, similar to a simulation being created through a computer. It doesn't mean we live in a simulation, or as some say that simulation theory means that we live in a video game. That's not what I'm saying at all. Going back to Plato in 600 BC, we have intuited that this world that we live in is not the quote unquote real world, that we come from a higher layer of reality that is referred to as the base layer of reality. And in my book, The Psychedelic Christ, I have a very intense discussion about simulation theory and Christianity. And I was compelled to do that, to have that conversation, because of the number of references made by Jesus saying that he's not from this world. He's from the world above. We live in the world below. And that our object is to transcend this reality. And it is possible, it's possible that AI and transhuman technology will be able to assist us in understanding the deeper nature of our reality as a quote unquote simulation, or a reality that behaves similar to a simulation, and that we can in fact transcend this realm. And I say that it's possible that AI and transhuman technology will be able to assist us in doing this because of the logic that the Vatican expressed about non-human intelligence, extraterrestrial life. This was soon after the New York Times published the article revealing the Tic Tac videos, which is considered one of the penultimate moments of disclosure. And after that, the Vatican said, well, if Martians land at the Vatican, we'll baptize them, which is kind of funny. And then they said, but they might not look like us, ... Who are we to limit God's creativity? Now, that went right into my consciousness, that statement, and I immediately applied it to AI and transhumanism. Again, the theory, the idea, the hypothesis that transhumanism is an ultimate expression of Christianity's quest for perfection, to transcend this realm of sin and return to the realm of perfection. Perhaps these technologies, or rephrased, what if these technologies are in fact a gift from God? What if God intended us to use these new technologies in order to discover more about the true nature of our universe and the true nature of ourselves? That logic is something that I never could overcome in all of my years of being critical about AI and transhuman technology. It was the gap in my presentations. I would say I'm 99.9% sure we do not want to go down the AI and transhuman path, but there's this bit of logic over here. Maybe this technology is a gift from God, and we need to learn how to use it properly, in a moral, in a righteous, in a spiritual sense. That is what I would like to have heard from Pope Leo about AI and transhumanism in his encyclical. Perhaps these tools are gifts from God. Isn't everything God anyway? And that we can learn to utilize them from a higher spiritual purpose. That in fact, perhaps what AI and transhumanism is actually a call for humans to upgrade themselves mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, so that we now can learn more about our true selves and unite with the greater consciousness that's out there. So those are my immediate thoughts about Magnifica Humanitas, Magnificent Humanity. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll look forward to sharing further thoughts as more revelations are made about this encyclical. And of course, we'll keep you up to date on my latest thinking regarding AI and transhumanism. So Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to seeing you soon.